Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, let's jump right into the fascinating logistics behind one of the absolute most famous UFO mysteries of all time. We are looking at a story that has completely captivated the public imagination for decades. You know the one: hidden mountain bases, reverse-engineered alien spacecraft, and a massive, sprawling government cover-up. But today, we're actually going to look past the flying saucers for a minute. We're going to forensically examine the core of this entire mystery, the anatomy of an alleged identity wipe. I want you to genuinely consider this for a second. Could a shadow agency actually perfectly scrub an individual's entire academic and professional existence? I mean, could they really delete your birth records, completely erase your college degrees, and somehow silence literally everyone you ever went to school with? It sounds exactly like a Hollywood thriller, right? But this is exactly what one man claimed happened to him. And to understand why he claimed this, we've got to start at the very beginning of his story. Picture this. The scene is late 1988 at a highly classified camouflaged mountain facility known as S4, which sits out near Papoose Lake. Enter Bob Lazar. He claimed he was vetted by the famous physicist Edward Teller and hired as a staff physicist to reverse engineer extraterrestrial technology. He said this facility was built literally right into the side of a mountain, complete with textured doors designed to perfectly blend in with the desert rock. Inside, he says he was assigned to study a craft he nicknamed the Sport Model. He described it as the seamless 30 to 40-foot silver disc that was cold to the touch. And inside, the layout was totally minimalist. No wiring, no sharp angles, and, this is the crucial detail, unusually small chairs, seemingly built for beings much, much shorter than your average human.
Now, what's really wild about this story is the alleged power source. Lazar claimed this Sport Model was fueled by a remarkable, extraordinarily heavy material he called Element 115. He said it sat in a small central reactor on the ship's lower deck. But here's the catch. That element didn't officially exist on the periodic table in 1988. It was completely unprovable to mainstream science at the time. In fact, it wasn't until 2003 that scientists actually managed to synthesize it, eventually naming it moscovium.
So how did this thing actually fly? According to Lazar, this ship didn't use traditional thrust like a rocket or an airplane. No, instead, that reactor bombarded element 115 with protons. This reaction supposedly produced an intense gravitational field, which was then directed through 3 movable gravity amplifiers at the base of the craft. So instead of pushing the ship forward, these amplifiers literally bent space-time ahead of the vehicle. By pulling the fabric of space toward the disk, the craft could travel vast distances almost instantly, completely bypassing the traditional rules of inertia and acceleration. Okay, so if this is all highly classified, world-altering technology, how in the world did the story get out? Well, Lazar went public. He went on a Las Vegas television station, KLAS-TV, and completely blew the lid off Area 51 and S4. But shortly after going public, a glaring issue popped up. Reporters simply could not verify his background. And this brings us to his famous alibi. Lazar and the folks who support his story assert that the federal government initiated a total identity wipe. They claim the government intentionally deleted his birth records, his elite academic history, and his employment records, just to portray him as a fraud, ensuring the public would totally dismiss his claims about alien technology.
Now, proponents of the identity wipe theory love to point to what they consider a smoking gun, a 1982 Los Alamos National Laboratory phone directory that explicitly lists Robert Lazar. Since the lab later denied having records of him as a staff physicist, proponents argue, aha, this proves the government actively scrubbed his files. But when you take a closer look, you notice a tiny critical detail. Right next to his name are the letters K/M. That stood for Kirk Meyer, which was an outside subcontracting firm. This means he was employed as a technician by an external contractor, not as a staff physicist for the national lab itself. His record wasn't wiped at all. His role was just fundamentally different from what he claimed on TV.
Let's talk about those elite degrees. Lazar claimed to have earned dual master's degrees, one in physics from MIT and another in electronics from Caltech. But when investigative journalists and ufologists actually dug into this, they found absolutely nothing. 0 enrollment records, 0 diplomas, and perhaps most unbelievably, no mandatory master's thesis on file in either university's library. I mean, for anyone who has ever survived the grueling, exhausting process of defending a master's thesis, you can imagine just how absurd it is that he couldn't even remember the titles of his own supposed theses.
The investigation then took a kind of comical turn when Lazar was pressed to name just one single professor from his time at Caltech who could vouch for him. Just one. He finally offered the name William Duxler. Researchers immediately went looking for Dr. Duxler. And well, they found him, all right, but there was a massive contradiction. Dr. Duxler had never ever taught at Caltech. He was actually a physics professor at Pierce Junior College down in Los Angeles.
The utter impossibility of his academic claims becomes completely undeniable when you lay out the timeline. Official records show Lazar graduated high school in the bottom third of his class, which is a performance that would make admission to prestigious graduate programs like MIT or Caltech virtually impossible. Then, in the early 1980s, public records show him enrolled at that exact junior college in California, Pierce College, at the exact same time he claimed to be living thousands of miles away in Cambridge, Massachusetts, attending MIT. Actually, scratch that, it gets worse. A 1990 legal document revealed Lazar claiming a bachelor's degree from Pacifica University. That was a notorious, unaccredited correspondence diploma mill that literally went out of business in 1978.
You really have to think about just how much physical paper exists for any university graduate. To perfectly erase a student, especially back then, the government wouldn't just be hitting delete on a modern database server. They would have to physically locate and destroy printed commencement programs archived deep in university libraries. They would have to find and manually redact local newspaper announcements that print lists of recent graduates. They'd have to track down physical alumni directories that had already been mailed out to thousands of people across the country. And that brings us to this incredibly powerful number, 0. Bob Lazar has produced exactly 0 personal photographs from his years at these prestigious universities, 0 textbooks. And despite those campuses being filled with thousands of people, 0 classmates, 0 roommates, and 0 professors have ever come forward to validate his attendance. Sure, the government might be able to classify a digital employee log, but enforcing total, permanent silence on thousands of human beings across multiple states, while simultaneously erasing every physical yearbook and printed directory in existence, that is a logistical impossibility.
Because of this overwhelming, glaring lack of evidence, the consensus is pretty clear. Even Stanton Friedman, a guy who was a prominent UFO researcher and dedicated his entire life to finding evidence of alien visitation, heavily researched Lazar's past and drew a harsh, skeptical line. Friedman concluded that Lazar's academic credentials were, quote, entirely manufactured to establish a sense of scientific authority when he was pitching his flying saucer claims to the public.
Now, if you are still somehow wondering if the US government could secretly erase a person's entire past to discredit a massive top-secret leak, well, we have to look at the ultimate real-world reality check. Let's talk about Edward Snowden and his massive 2013 intelligence leaks. Skeptics use Snowden as the absolute ultimate test of this erased history defense, because it highlights how the logic completely falls apart when you apply it to a verified real-world whistleblower.
The contrast here is just stunning. On one side, you have Bob Lazar claiming dual master's degrees from elite universities with 0 proof, blaming a flawless, magical government wipe. On the other side, you have Edward Snowden, who was responsible for the most damaging intelligence leak in U.S. history. And guess what? Snowden openly admitted he did not have a conventional college degree. He was a high school dropout who later earned a GED. And the government never tried to manufacture a fake college history to discredit him, nor did they try to erase his real past. His verifiable lack of a degree was simply accepted, because it was the truth.
When Snowden leaked those highly classified NSA documents, the U.S. government didn't pretend he never existed. They openly acknowledged his employment. His work history with the CIA and as a subcontractor for Booz Allen Hamilton was easily verified through standard, boring corporate HR channels the government never even attempted to rewrite. He had hundreds of actual coworkers and supervisors who immediately confirmed his identity to the media. Snowden left a massive, undeniable trail of real-world interactions, completely unlike the total, bizarre isolation of Lazar's story.
And this brings us to the ultimate logical flaw. It's the logistical paradox of prosecution. Think about it. When Snowden leaked state secrets, the Department of Justice immediately unsealed a criminal complaint against him, charging him under the Espionage Act. To legally prosecute a whistleblower for leaking classified systems, the government actually has to legally establish proof that the person was employed and had access to those very systems. Pretending Snowden, or Lazar, never worked for the state would make a legal prosecution entirely impossible. Attempting an identity wipe is completely self-defeating for a government that's actually trying to protect its secrets and punish those who leak them.
So, I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. If the U.S. government was absolutely desperate to neutralize Edward Snowden, yet didn't and practically couldn't erase his past or pretend his completely average educational background didn't exist, how on earth could they perfectly erase a physicist's entire existence across multiple elite universities? The evidence strongly suggests that Bob Lazar's academic history isn't missing because of a perfect government conspiracy. It's missing because it simply never existed in the first place. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking questions and keep looking for the evidence.